koutou katoa, na mihi nui kia koutou, and thank you to the Financial Services Council for hosting me this morning, for hosting all of us, particularly to you, Rod Flanagan, and to you, Richard Kilpin, along with the Strategic Research Committee who've come up with the piece of work that we're focused on today. Richard, I want to note it's not the election in 2 weeks, although I would welcome that. It's the budget in 2 weeks, but I think all of us have top of mind that it is going to be a very pivotal budget, both in terms of the election, but actually I think in terms of the trajectory for New Zealand over the next few years. We are in very challenging times. I know attendees listening online are coming from across the financial services sector, so you will have already been encountering a lot of the financial distress that we are increasingly seeing in our community as the cost of living bites hard, as interest rates have climbed so steeply, and more New Zealanders are having to transfer from a low interest rate mortgage to a much higher interest rate mortgage, often with a lot of debt being carried, and at the same time as many people are losing confidence about the economic fortunes of New Zealand. And all those things combined, I think, are borne out in the statistics in your report, which I have to say completely marry up with the experience I'm having in the community. So that first number, that more than 50% of New Zealanders are worrying daily or weekly about money. And that's 300,000 more people than when you last did the survey. My experience is that over the past 12 to 18 months, more and more people have shared with me how stretched their household budget is, trying to keep up with their costs, whether that's their grocery shop, whether that's their rates, whether that's their rent. But the newer phenomenon that I have witnessed in the past few months is increasingly there's a group of people who are very concerned about their mortgages. As people switch to those higher interest rates, it's having a significant impact, perhaps on a group of New Zealanders who hadn't considered that they would ever be in such a position of financial weakness. I think particularly of those younger families who scrimped and saved to buy a home in what was a very inflated housing market, who have very large mortgages and whose mortgage rates have effectively doubled as they've gone from one fixed term to another. I spoke with a nurse recently. Her and her husband had refixed their mortgage. They were looking for another $500 a fortnight. And she said to me, where exactly am I meant to find that money? They'd chosen as a family that she would take a second job, working part-time for a travel agency. But she said, look, it's just heartbreaking. She'd had to say to her 8-year-old son during the school holidays, no, we won't be buying a bag of mandarins. And he'd said, well, no, they're healthy, Mum. And she said, no, we can't afford it because they were $11 at the supermarket. And those sorts of stories are stories that I'm hearing all the time, people who didn't expect to be in very financially difficult situations but find themselves there. When I go door knocking, it is still superannuitants, people on fixed incomes who are finding it very hard to keep up with prices. But also I hear lots of stories from different parts of our community about the impact that is having. So I'd share with you that I spoke with a lawyer recently involved in marital disputes, and he said he has never been busier. And I think we know that when there are financial challenges, when there are economic challenges, that has a very real impact on people's well-being. And of course, the survey bears that out, with the negative effects on well-being increasing, with a large proportion of people reporting that increased financial stress. And look, part of that stress is people not feeling they are resilient to the rainy day, and that's a striking finding in your report, that 53% of people would not be able to access $5,000 a week should they need it in an emergency. So all of that combined, and then this looming talk of recession. Bloomberg recently put out an index where New Zealand was in the unfortunate silver medal position in terms of our likelihood of a recession. The United Kingdom was ahead of us, but Bloomberg put our chances of recession at 70%. By contrast, Australia only had a 40% chance in that index. And I think that that is very much compounding people's feelings of financial distress, because what people had hoped was a temporary or transitory, I think was the word given to us, phenomenon, has in fact become quite embedded. And the sense is that while inflation has remained out of control for 2 years now, it still remains high and may be in our economy for another year or more. That interest rates have had to climb steeper and higher than many people thought would be necessary. And I'm seeing patchy impact across the community. Some businesses really feeling it, particularly those who are debt exposed and themselves are paying higher interest rates, and particularly those who are exposed to New Zealanders who have less money to spend because they are servicing bigger mortgages. So what does it all mean for the budget, and what should our decision makers be focused on? Well, my view is it is completely the wrong time to be having flirtations with the idea of new taxes. And I say that for a couple of reasons. One of the reasons is actually that it goes to this question of confidence. And as I talk to you about people's lack of confidence in the future of the economy, it has created a real ripple already of concern that the government may be considering a capital gains tax, a wealth tax, some form of an inheritance tax, because there are a lot of people who look at that and say, well, that could impact me. I'm a small business owner, or I've got a large KiwiSaver account, or I've got a rental property, and they worry about their ability to manage that. But B, people understand that we are at a time of fragility in our economy. We're not at a time where we can afford to scare away investment, to scare away talent, and to scare away those people who are contributing a lot to our tax take. So I think that the uncertainty around future direction of tax policy is very concerning. For our part, we also think in the national team that this budget needs to achieve two critical things. One, it needs to chart a sustainable, long-term path to disciplined government spending. Government spending has increased significantly as a proportion of our economy. And the overwhelming response from New Zealanders I get to that is, where has all the money gone? What is the impact for those dollars? Because despite spending $1 billion more a week as a government, people point to the disastrous situation in our emergency waiting rooms, soaring violent crime, challenges across our community that extra spending does not seem to in any way have addressed. So National in this budget would like to see a path back to disciplined spending. We think the approach the government should have taken is to have asked all government agencies to put up things that are not having the impact that they need to on a bang for buck basis, so that money could be reprioritised. We believe that with that reprioritisation effort, it would be possible for the government to provide inflation adjustments to our tax thresholds. And that would be fair for a couple of reasons. New Zealanders are being hit by inflation and interest rates, but inflation is also pushing them into higher tax brackets, meaning that the average effective tax rates for median income working New Zealanders have increased significantly. And that means that they are paying more tax on a real basis. We think the government is overdue to address that, and we would, in this budget, like to see inflation adjustments to those tax thresholds. It's the right thing to do, but it's also the most principled way to ensure people have more money in their back pockets. And it's responsible where it can be done through reprioritising spending, because that way it's not putting more pressure from a fiscal impulse perspective on inflation. We think the government needs to take seriously its role in taking pressure off inflation, and therefore taking pressure off the interest rate track that the Reserve Bank is on. We would also like to see a real approach of regulatory and cost containment. We think it's distressing that there is still work going on to develop an income insurance scheme with a jobs tax that would accompany it. We don't think that the interest deductibility changes to landlords have achieved good things for our housing market. We worry that they're continuing to add costs for landlords. And we think it's certainly not a good time to be introducing fair pay agreements, or so-called fair pay agreements, which promise to put a massive impost of bureaucracy on many businesses across the country at a time they are not well placed to manage it. We think immigration policy is going to be nimble. We have been out there critical of how slow the government was to move on immigration settings as worker shortages raised their very ugly head and have certainly compounded New Zealand's inflation challenges. But we acknowledge that as we look over the medium term, yes, we're going to have to remain very welcoming to the highly skilled people we need into the economy. But if some of the negative forecasts about unemployment come true, we'll also have to be nimble about adjusting those settings for some of the workers entering the economy. Look, finally, we are orthodox in the National Party. It is the Reserve Bank's job to tackle inflation. We will have the Reserve Bank before the Financial Committee tomorrow, and I will be continuing to question them about whether they think that they have delivered financial stability by allowing fiscal stimulus to have increased house prices and asset prices generally so dramatically, only for them to be coming down so rapidly now and leaving so many New Zealanders in a precarious position. That's the short term. That's this budget and where the focus should be, very much a return to disciplined spending, the government doing more to get bang for its buck, being very careful about its regulatory imposition and very orthodox policies. But medium term, I think now more than ever, we need to focus on the productive growth of the New Zealand economy. It became almost a talking point in recent years that people would say to me as National's finance spokesperson, oh, well, National, you're very focused on the economy. You always want to talk about economics and finance. And, I'm more focused on well-being, people would say to me. And I think it's become incredibly clear to all New Zealanders that it is almost impossible to have well-being if we don't have a basis of a strong, growing economy. And so National's view is that we need to, as a country, focus very much on backing those people who have what it takes to grow our economy over the next few years, by which we mean every single New Zealander who has the capacity to contribute, but particularly looking at what are the sectors, what are the entrepreneurs, what are the businesses that we can grow, what are the barriers in front of them now, and how can government act to remove those barriers and where possible turbocharge their efforts. I think, for example, of the export education sector, which was decimated by COVID-19, which still is very much a shadow of its former self, even while Australia's up to full tilt. I think of our tourism sector, which has not recovered fully, which has been a wonderful source of foreign earnings in the past, and whose revival would contribute to closing what has become a very worrying current account deficit. I think also of those growing future sectors, whether that's about what we're doing in high tech or in artificial intelligence or in gaming. But I also think that traditional backbone of the agriculture and food producing sectors are really going to come into their own as the world worries more about food security and is more challenged in its supply chains. To enable the growth that New Zealand's going to need to deliver better living standards and well-being to our people, there's 5 areas a national government will be focused on. The first is education. If we look inside our classrooms today, we have a very worrying indication of where our workforce might be in 10 or 15 years. Achievement in the basics of reading, writing and maths has declined, and National is determined to both arrest that decline and deliver quick progress so that our students are learning more. We're particularly worried about the impact truancy and declining achievement is having on students from lower socioeconomic communities. We believe that's a future social, moral and economic disaster. And we hold true to our belief that yes, we must invest more in education, that is necessary, but it is not sufficient. The government has increased investment in education by about $5 billion a year annually, and yet the basics haven't been got right. So we will be returning to some simple things, an hour of reading, writing and maths every day, a prescriptive curriculum that sets out what students need to learn, assessment, progress monitoring, much more resourced support for teachers in terms of lesson plans and instruction. Education will be a critical focus. Second, we think government has a role to play in supporting innovation across the economy, both in terms of making it easier for our venture firms, our growing firms to access global capital, and you will hear more from us on that. Also, their ability to access specialised talent needed to grow their businesses in terms of immigration policy. But we also believe that the current innovation system across government has become very complex, and we will be delivering policy to simplify that and make it easier for people at all stages of the innovation journey to invest more in the capital and the skills needed to drive innovation. Third, we think that New Zealand continues to suffer from an infrastructure deficit that will hold back the productivity of our economy if we're not to get on with addressing it. It's not going to be enough to have visualisations of trams down Dominion Road on the front page of the Herald. We actually need to get building. And National identifies that the three critical things for that are a much faster consenting framework, and we don't believe the proposed changes to the RMA deliver that. A much more modern approach to financing major infrastructure projects, including openness to private capital, and a much more long-term view about funding infrastructure and a long-term pipeline. Fourth, as I've already said, the regulatory environment matters, and we will be taking a very circumspect approach to re-regulating industries. You know, the case in point that hopefully the people on this forum would understand is the government's very well-intended changes to the CCCFA. Look, the law was passed for the right reasons to reduce the number of predatory loan activities, but then the regulation that was delivered was so prescriptive that it has terribly constrained the access lower income and lower wealth New Zealanders in particular have to credit, but has also got between the banks and their customers in a way that we think has been harmful, and we do intend to fix up that regulation, but also take it as a lesson about good intentions and then their potentially perverse impacts. So we think it's a time for very careful approach to regulation. Finally, I just want to, before I finish these remarks, just say that when we read these reports of financial distress of people worried about their futures, I think it can get very negative. I want to say that I still have real optimism for New Zealand's economy in the medium term. I believe that if we look globally and we truly look outward about where we stand relative to other countries, we can see that we are potentially very well positioned if we get some of these basics that I've been talking about today, tax, spending, regulation, right. And I say that because when I look out into the world, I see New Zealand as one that already has free trade agreements with many of the major markets our exporters wish to access. We have very strong trading relationships in the fastest growing part of the global economy. We are outside of the border disputes and security concerns that many countries are increasingly concerned about. We're surrounded by a big blue ocean. We produce food, as I say. We are already very much a renewable energy economy with the capacity to vastly increase the investment in affordable renewable energy that will allow us to meet our climate change challenges. We are still a country full of innovative people, full of ideas. I meet someone or a firm every week that just wish to be unleashed to do what they can do better. So there is reasons to be optimistic for the economy, but we are only going to deliver more financial security to New Zealanders if we get back to the basics of managing a strong economy. And so you will hear a lot more from National on that agenda over the next few months as we lead into the election. And I want to thank each of you who in your communities and your businesses are doing your bit to support New Zealanders in need. I'm sure that that makes your job very difficult sometimes. I want to acknowledge that. And I want to say that should National be elected to lead the next government, we will look to you as sources of insight and advice. And I'd like to thank you for coming on this forum this morning. Thank you.